You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Welcome back to our new season of Justice is Served for 2014. I am your host, Ebony K. Williams, and my lovely co-host.
I am Mari Fagel. This is the show where we discuss the latest in headline legal news. You know, we took a break for the holidays. Yes, we have a lot of stories to tackle in the new year. We have a lot of exciting guests coming up. But to start off the show, I want to talk about a story that happened over the holidays. It's been getting a lot of attention, and it's the story of Jahai McMath. She is the 13-year-old girl who went into Children's Hospital in Oakland to have tonsil surgery and was later declared brain dead. Now, this story has been getting a lot of attention, a lot of different sides coming at it, and there's been a lot of misconceptions. Now, Ebony, you, over the break, you were on HLN, Fox, discussing this story. Tell me what it was like, what it's like in the court of public opinion with the media talking about this case.
Well, I'm glad you brought the court of public opinion, Mari, because we know from legal professional backgrounds, there's what you can prove in a court of law and those things. But that doesn't stop the public from having very strong opinions, very strong personal opinions about something that just feels unsettling. And you're right. I mean, I think what caused people so much pause in this case, and one reason it's gotten so much attention, is it's such a routine surgery. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've had it before. I don't know. Mara, have you ever had your tonsils taken out?
I have not.
I did. And, the surgery was whatever, and then you move on. And it's a typical healing process. In a week, you're back on your feet and things are back to normal. So when that doesn't happen, and not only does it not happen, I mean, this young girl looks like she's battling for her life and may have lost that battle, people are very confused by that. So the first time I appeared on air talking about the case, it was on HLN, it was on Jane Velez Mitchell. And I actually, it was really emotional because the mother and grandmother also were on the segment with me. And Jane was really able to interview them. At that time, this was before the injunction, which we'll get to where we are in the legal process of this case in a moment. At that point, this young lady's mother was, and she also is a very young woman. This is a woman in her 20s, and you could just tell very overwhelmed, not only with emotion, but by this process. Because, you've got the doctors and the hospital saying, well, we've got no choice. We have to take her off because she's brain dead. I mean, at some point, the coroner's office already issuing a death certificate. I mean, they were, referring to her daughter as the deceased, and this woman was just devastated. Mar, you could see it in her face, you could see it in her eyes, because she's like, how would anyone else feel to hear your daughter, your baby girl, referred to as the deceased, the body? I mean, my God, just how dehumanizing this has been. And I think that's also why the public has had such an outcry about this. And then the grandmother, who I was very impressed with her composure. She is a nurse, and so she had a very specific opinion about it as well. So very difficult case to talk about in the media because there's such strong feelings about it.
And because there are two very sympathetic parties. On the one hand, you do have Children's Hospital. They provide medical care for poor children on Medi-Cal for free oftentimes. And then on the other side, you have this family, this 13-year-old, and these unanswered questions. But a lot of the discussion focused on brain death. Is she dead or is she alive? The right to life. A lot of these things we saw in the Terry Schiavo case. And I have some experience in this area in that my family runs a medical malpractice firm. My dad is a doctor. He worked in emergency room medicine for over a decade and now represents medical malpractice plaintiffs. And one thing I want to say before we talk about Jahai's case is that we don't know all of the facts.
Right, of course not.
We don't know whether this is a case of medical negligence, but what we do know is that, like you said, she went in for a fairly routine surgery, though the hospital said there were complications. It was a complicated surgery because opening up her airway, it was forced sleep apnea. But then what we do know is that she was choking on her own blood. And
to that point, Mary, I just want to say, in that HLN interview, her grandmother, that was her point of pause. Her grandmother said, her experience in hospitals as a nurse, when something like that happens, when the choking or anything that's restricting airway kind of goes on, there's an immediate response from medical personnel, whether it be doctors, nurses, or whoever. The grandmother, at least, is saying that there was a lack of urgency when it came to her granddaughter. And that's, again, where this is starting to look like there's a lot of answers that need to be accounted for.
Yes, and the proper procedure when that happens, when you are choking on your own blood, is for a doctor to come in, put a tube in, and open the airway. What we know in Jahai's case is that that did not happen for several minutes. So her brain was without oxygen for several minutes. And when the hospital did the CT scan, they found little to no brain activity. So that is where we stand with her case and the facts we know now. Now, I have seen several cases similar to this, cases of medical negligence, and there are a lot of misconceptions because, especially in California, people read these multi-million-dollar verdicts against these hospitals. What most people don't know is that in California, there is a limit on non-economic damages. What does that mean? That means that if someone like Jahai was to go without oxygen for just a few minutes, suffer some sort of injury, but an injury that they can continue to lead a fairly normal life with medical assistance, that case can go to a jury, and the jury can award damages for what medical costs are needed to provide care, their future loss of earnings because they cannot work, things of that nature.
So if properly compensate.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
If someone like Jahai goes several minutes, 10 minutes, like in her case, without oxygen, and the hospital and the family together make a decision to turn off life support, to turn off the ventilator, and she dies, that child's life is capped. The value of her life is artificially limited to $250,000, a limit that was set back in 1975.
That's so crazy, Mom.
And has not been adjusted for inflation. That limit in today's dollars would be $1 million. So we're talking about a limit that was set 38, 39 years ago.
And which I would say even $1 million is still kind of marginal compared to an entire lifespan of someone. And you said something important there too, Mari, which is the hospital and the family together deciding. And so, of course, we know the Children's Hospital in Oakland would love it if the family would consent, but they're not giving consent. And by all measures that I've seen in the media, this family will never consent to taking this young girl off of support. And that's where it becomes very adversarial. Very adversarial. And I think when you talk about medical malpractice, people can feel like this our families just milking these institutions. And there's this very kind of palpable tension between plaintiffs or wronged families and hospitals, because of course we need hospitals, we need doctors. We don't want to put them in a position where they are so beat up litigiously that they're unable to perform a very needed service. But at the same time, there has to be a standard of care established, and when that is breached, there has to be accountability.
And there are so many different professions where accidents can happen, where negligence can happen, where someone can die at the hands of someone else.
And cause
but we
life,
don't see those limits in these other professions. If a child were to die at the hands of a pilot in a plane crash, of a driver in a car crash, a jury would decide what is fair and what is reasonable, what the family of that loved one can receive for justice. For medical negligence cases, I do want to explain something because people don't understand this. The jury cannot know about this limit. So you put on the case in front of a jury, and what happens oftentimes in these medical malpractice cases is they will award a higher amount in for pain and suffering that these families have gone through, and then they come to find out later on that in California the law has stripped them of that authority. So that is, even if they think it should be a higher amount, it doesn't matter what the jury thinks.
And that's why
what
I have a
California
problem
law
with
says.
this California law, Mari. It basically undermines the value of the jury system, because that's the point to me of a jury system, is to let them hear the facts, let them hear the expert testimony and otherwise, and let them decide what is just compensation, because that's compensatory damages. That's what the term refers to. When you strip them of that, as this 75 law does, you undermine that ability, and it's very suffering. And we don't. I'm from the home state of North Carolina. We don't have that type of cap. I was completely flabbergasted to hear California had that. It really, to me, undermines the credibility of that part of the justice system.
And I want to talk about how this cap comes into play and relates to the Jahai McMath case. We don't know the hospital's motivations. We don't know why just 2 days after the CT scan, they were pushing for the family to turn off life support, and the hospital spokesman was very adamant in saying that she was already dead. We don't know the financial whether there were financial motivations, but because there is this financial differential between someone on life support and off life support, it gives this air of impropriety, because even if they weren't motivated, some people could think, okay, a hospital, if they turn off life support and this case goes to trial and medical negligence, the hospital just has to shell out $250,000, which is
a drop in the bucket. Come on.
And if she continues to remain on life support and on a ventilator, it could be a multi-million-dollar verdict. And there are, in so many other aspects, we try to get rid of that aura of impropriety. Like with a judge. In a case, if there's a conflict of interest, that judge recuses himself. Even if he can be fair, he takes himself off of the case to get rid of that view of impropriety, that maybe he couldn't be fair, the appearance of it. But with the hospitals, because you have this financial differential, you have the same hospital that could be on the hook for medical negligence is the same hospital that is telling this family, maybe you should take this child off of life support.
And not even maybe. They're like ordering them to, and to the point where they're really, you know, using the justice system to almost force the family to do that. And that's really, to me, where there's the problem. Right? To me, this hospital has zero credibility to be making any decisions about what happens with this young lady moving forward. You know what I mean? Like, and if I was a hospital PR person or representative for the hospital, I would push for an independent medical expert to come in on this thing, and they be the ones to make a decision about what happens to her moving forward, for that reason, to remove the appearance of impropriety, because it is just reeking of it at this point. And this hospital, I mean, my goodness, Mari, the financial conflict of interest that's going on here with them, to me, removes them the right to decide whether this young lady gets off life support at this point or not. I just have a problem with that.
And now I want to bring in a guest. We have Bob Pack on the line, and he knows all too well about this limit and about this law in California. Now, Bob's two children.
Hey, Mara, we haven't been able to get him on the line.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll get him on the line soon.
Okay, sure.
But I can introduce his story before we get him on the line. His two children, Troy and Alana Pack, were 7 and 10 in 2003 when a driver who was high on prescription painkillers that she had gotten from doctors at Kaiser Hospital plowed into his children, hit and killed them while they were playing.
Oh my gosh.
And
so sad.
As Bob and his wife investigated what happened, and, you know, the facts came to light about who this driver was and what she had been doing and what these doctors had been doing preceding this tragic accident, when he was making the decision to sue the doctor, because you can sue a doctor who, if they're over-prescribing painkillers, if it's reasonably foreseeable that their action could cause an accident like this, then they are negligent. And he came to find out that his two children's lives were valued at $250,000, a value set in 1975.
And that's the thing about this cap, Mara, like you said, the jury did their job. They found a causal link between this doctor's negligent actions and the death of these children. So I'm sure in a juror's mind, you're thinking, this hospital and doctor will be held fully accountable. Imagine the surprise and probably anger from some jurors once they find out that even though they, in a court of law, ruled under the evidence presented to them that there was responsibility, that responsibility is slighted to this extent. I mean, my goodness, I would be angry if I was a juror. And I made the determination that this man and his wife were stripped of their children because of the actions of a doctor in a hospital. And then you tell me that I have no say-so as to how to compensate that family for the death of 2 small children. It just feels absolutely outrageous. It feels absolutely outrageous. And then, like you said, 1975, my goodness, Jerry Brown was in his first term of governor back then. I mean, this was before you or I were born. I cannot believe this has not been revisited.
Whereas pretty much everything else has been at least kept up with inflation. I mean, Social Security benefits, Medicare,
unemployment, everything.
Yeah, minimum wage. And so the reason, hopefully we'll get our guest on the line soon, but the reason I wanted Bob Pack to call in is because he saw this injustice and he did not want his children's death to go in vain. He decided to do something about it. Medical negligence is the third leading cause of death in this country. And he started an initiative called the Troy and Alana Pack Initiative. It hopefully will appear on the ballot this fall for California voters to vote on. And it's a 3-part initiative. The first part being raising this cap to at least meet inflation. And we've talked about why it is important to either raise or remove the cap completely.
Remove the cap,
because then it doesn't give the hospital this conflict of interest.
Well, and comfort zone, Mari. That's the thing. I mean, I think people have to remember when their money, and I think people get really confused about why money is the product of some of these civil lawsuits, and it feels like, well, are people just looking for money? No, what it is that is a check and balance system that works to keep people in line with certain societal standards. And when you remove that, I mean, I really feel like it's really not doing any service to our society. At that point, there's nothing to really, obviously ethics should, but I mean, at that point, there's no real motivation for doctors. If they know, no matter what they do, their maxed out cap payout is $250,000, I just think it undermines the whole process.
And like you said, it strips the jury of their authority.
Absolutely.
And
it ties their hands.
I want to ask you, what is it like, having practiced in North Carolina?
Sure.
How does the system function when there is no cap? Because
when there's no cap, again, I think that, again, it keeps everything a little tighter. The checks and balances system is more in alignment because doctors know and nurses know and hospitals know that if you fall short of these prescribed standards of care, you're going to be on the hook, potentially for tens of millions of dollars. I mean, it's a kind of system that if you are negligent enough or a jury decides that you could potentially not have that livelihood anymore. You could not have the ability to practice medicine anymore if what you did was so egregious that, that's the result. And I just think it empowers our jury system. It empowers the entire process to be fully exploratory in their determinations. And there's just more accountability is what I've seen. I want to share that talking about this again on HLN specifically with the family and the grandmother, it was very interesting for me to see their emotional response and how even in the midst of this horrible tragedy, this family was focused, Mari. They had a goal. They were advocating for their daughter who could not speak for herself. And that's really important. I want everyone listening and watching to really understand that we all have the power to do that. You don't have to just bow down to these what feel like bureaucratic institutions, whether it's a hospital or a business or a company. You can be that voice, and look at the difference they made. I have to tell you, once the hospital said, this is, I think it was like 5 p.m. Pacific time. I think it was a Wednesday for some reason. I just remember being in the Fox studio on that day, that she was going to be taken off support, and that was going to be the end of that. And in the legal community, we all felt like this is such a sad ending, but unfortunately this road is over. Then here comes the temporary injunction from a judge that says, you know what, not so fast. We are going to give this family at least an opportunity to find an alternative. And they were successful in that.
And I want to explain something also. What was interesting was because the hospital believed that she was dead. Children's Hospital, there's two things that need to be done to transfer her to a facility that would continue to care for her. They need to put in a feeding tube because for a while she was just on IV fluids. Those have no nutrients. So for a while she was going without food. They need to put in a feeding tube, and they also need to put in a breathing tube to hook her up to a ventilator. And the hospital refused to do that. So we're kind of unclear on exactly what happened and where she is now, because the family and the attorney are keeping that out of the public eye for her safety, because like you said, this story has been so controversial, and it's brought many different people and sides to the table of life and death in discussing these life and death situations. And what does death mean? What does life mean?
What does death mean? What does life mean? And also there's an element of faith that I've seen kind of come to the surface in this conversation or this debate. And many people feel like, I did Governor Huckabee's show a couple of weeks ago, and he discussed it on his show. And he's from Arkansas, and he's a very conservative and spiritual man. And he said, doesn't this family have a right to exercise their faith? Perhaps they do believe in miracles. Perhaps they do believe that there is some intervention from a higher power that, despite all the medical evidence to the contrary, as long as she is still in some way breathing, whether it's ventilator or not, that something can come in and change this. And he had a guest on who was the husband of a woman who was in a coma for, I think it was 5 or 6 years. And they told him the same thing, she's never going to be beyond this vegetative state and blah, blah, blah. So it was slight distinction in terms of the brain dead issue. So his situation was more akin to Terry Schiavo, but still no hope is what this man was told. And his wife woke up, and his wife now is functioning and a part of his, world again. And that's all he ever wanted. So again, I'm not saying that that's going to happen for young Jahai, but I think the family deserves at least some window of time to function in that way.
And the thing is, with the extent of her injury, going 10 minutes without oxygen to the brain, what happens when there's no brain activity is eventually her organs will shut down.
Right.
So it is not like lesser states of brain injury, like being in a vegetative state. Yes. But at the same time, that's the family's decision to make at the end of the day. Absolutely. And I've gotten a lot of response on Twitter and on social media about this case, and don't attack this hospital, they do such good, or the family needs to let her rest in peace already. A lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about this case, or they think she's becoming a pawn in this. But if her story does bring to light this debate and this initiative, then
I think that has value. Absolutely. That absolutely has value. And again, I think a lot of people are unaware of the cap and unaware of the haste. I think that when I first heard the story, Mari, I'm just like,
how quickly?
Why? What is the rush? I mean, it was like a matter of a week or two. And
over the holidays.
Absolutely. And I'm like, what is wrong with giving this family a month? What is wrong with giving them 6 weeks, 8 weeks even, to really see what's going on? And during that process, letting them process this mentally and emotionally, and perhaps maybe then they would be at a place to say goodbye to their granddaughter and daughter. But I mean, it was just like they were ready for this thing to be over with so quickly.
And it became a battle pitting this hospital spokesman against this family. Right. And he was making several strong statements. Sure. And one thing that's also interesting right now in this case is because she was issued a death certificate by a coroner, she is legally dead. Yeah. And so whatever facility is caring for her, they can't charge for a dead person. So we don't know where these funds are coming from. We know that the family did start up a Kickstarter-type charity funding page to pay for care somewhat and pay for this transition. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions in this case, and we don't know exactly what's going on at this moment, where she is, how she's doing. We hear some statements from both her attorney and the hospital spokesman, but we don't know all of the facts here. But hopefully, when that happens with these tragic stories and stories where there's a lot of unanswered questions, if you can at least focus on things that we can change, things that we can do, things that we can talk about, and refocus it, then, that's that's important for the public to understand.
I think so. I think that's progressive. I think that I hope to hear more conversation, Mark, about this cap and the potential, legislation changes that Bob, I know, is trying to initiate and different things like that, because that is a serious problem. I think just that existence of that cap puts this hospital in a very difficult situation, and one that, if I were them or I was their spokesperson, I would try to remove myself out of that. That is why I think the best thing that could have happened in that situation was an independent medical expert having nothing to do with that hospital, and maybe even somebody, I don't know, out of state, just somebody who just is not colored with that legal and political lens, to come in and make a determination as to medically what was going on with her.
Well, legally, with the court, when the hospital was battling with the family, they did have independent medical expert come in to say that she was brain dead, and they had another expert come in to say that she was not. And so there was this battle of the experts going on, experts that were not associated with the hospital, but that is in the legal side of things. That wasn't with the hospital, and it just, there is a conflict of interest when the same hospital that could be on the hook for a later possible jury trial against them is the same hospital that is inviting
the coroners. I just can't
informing the family that they have the option to turn off life support. There is that appearance of impropriety. So hopefully we will get our guest on in the future, in the coming weeks. But I do want to let viewers and listeners know about the initiative. They're garnering the signatures now to get it on the ballot in the fall for California voters across the state to vote on the issue. It's PACACT.org. That's PACKACT.org. And there's actually 3 parts to the initiative. One is raising the cap. The other 2 are very interesting, and ones people will have strong opinions about, and I think we need to do something about this. Drug testing doctors, just like you drug test,
sometimes city sanitation workers.
Pilots.
Of course, pilots. And that's a big deal. I have not practiced in med-mal, but I have handled administrative cases sometimes for doctors trying to get reinstated. Almost all the time, it was something substance abuse related.
And when there's so many when this type of testing is in all these other professions, why should it be any different when it's a profession where literally your life is in their hands? So drug testing is another part of the initiative, and the third part is creating a drug database that ensures that keeps track of where patients are getting their prescription pain medications, so that they aren't doctor shopping and going from one doctor to the next and keeping track of it, so that a tragedy like what happened to Bob Pack and his children doesn't happen again.
Now, we have something similar to that in North Carolina, and we've had it for a few years now because the problem just got so bad. And Kaiser and different hospitals like that, they'll kick you out. Once you keep coming back and back, they do have a way of tracking that, and you'll get flagged, essentially, when you go in after so many times. And people do try to doctor shop, but at some point, no one will give you those types of prescriptions, and then people go to the black market. But at any rate, that is done in other states, and it's been fairly successful, I would say, in flagging those addicts, really, who are trying to overindulge in prescription drugs and have high stakes. That is just such a tragedy, the way he lost his kids. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so hopefully we will have him on again to discuss how he's taken this tragedy and tried to refocus it into how we can change the system. So I really appreciate having an honest dialogue with you about this case, because it has been frustrating watching, a lot of these segments, with misinformation about how California in specific operates.
Absolutely, and that is a very distinctive way that we do things here, and people, like you said,
and not something they have in other states. They don't have it in North Carolina. They don't have this cap in most other states.
In most other states, that's ridiculous.
So most people aren't aware of that issue.
Huge, that's a huge piece of the analysis missing. I completely agree with you, and I would like to see more of that. But well, coming up, we've got some great shows coming up. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about next week, which is kind of this issue as to whether or not like rap lyrics or music videos and things like that should be admissible in trials, in criminal trials specifically. And there's a case coming up. You said it's going to be decided next week, right?
Yeah, in a state Supreme Court, there was a very interesting New York Times op-ed this week about a case where a man years before he allegedly committed murder, had written these violent lyrics alluding to murder. And those violent lyrics were then used as evidence against him in a trial where he was convicted.
Yeah.
And so state Supreme Court will be deciding in the upcoming week whether that should be allowed or not. There's a lot of issues of prejudice there. So we're going to be watching for that decision next week.
That's gonna be good.
We will talk about that next Friday. We have a lot of exciting guests in the coming weeks. We have Mark Garagos, celebrity attorney to Chris Brown and several others. We have Lisa
Mike Tyson,
Bloom, who is
Legal
about to
analyst,
come up with a new, or come out with a new book on the Trayvon Martin case. They are both high-profile celebrity attorneys and legal analysts.
And Lisa Bloom's also the daughter of Gloria Allred, so I'm sure maybe we can ask her some things about some of those fascinating cases that we know Attorney Allred has been involved in. So that's going to be exciting.
Yes,
Really
so we
looking
have a
forward to
lot
that.
of exciting guests and stories to discuss. Thank you for joining us for our all-new season of Justice is Served, and we will be back here next Friday.
Yay, see you guys next week.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, Dario Kristen, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network. If you have questions or comments, tweet us at BHL Online or email us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. For more exclusive content, visit blackhollywoodlive.com. This has been a presentation of the Black Hollywood Live Network. The views expressed here are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.
Thanks for watching Black Hollywood Live on YouTube. For more in-depth interviews and news, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to share your opinion in the comment section below here. See you soon, everyone. Bye.